welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
This is the podcast where every week we review a classic pro wrestling event from a streaming service.
And that classic pro wrestling event could be anything from a pay-per-view to a TV special, a major territory event, pretty much anything that is not a weekly episode of pro wrestling television.
We fire up the randomizer, it picks an event, Adam and I watch and review the show. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. We're always here to have fun. And this week was a little bit of all three, I think.
And it was also a fourth because this was a trip down memory lane for both of us, Jeremy, because this show we were both at, but this predates us knowing each other by at least, 12, 13 years?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the ECW November To Remember show, November 5th, 2000. This would be the final November To Remember for ECW. And ECW was Eastern Championship Wrestling before it became Extreme Championship Wrestling in 1994. ECW, led by Paul Heyman, became the number 3 wrestling promotion behind WWF and WCW. Their no rules and hardcore style, edgy content, and new stars gave ECW fans, made them more like a cult following. With their success on pay-per-view and their weekly national television show, they would become too big to be small and too small to compete with the big two companies. In 2000, ECW lost their television deal. Both ECW and WCW were declining quickly. With debts piling up, January 7th, 2001 would be the final ECW pay-per-view. In 2001, the company would close and file for bankruptcy. World Wrestling Entertainment would buy the assets of ECW in 2003. And we are in 2000 for this show, on the decline, but we open with the Jerry Lynn as the ECW World Champion in doing a backstage promo. And he's going to walk through Just Incredible, Steve Carino, and Sandman. So that's your main event as we cut to Just Incredible, who's with Francine.
First, Jerry Lynn is trying to sound hard. Jerry Lynn is doing his... This was Jerry Lynn as the ECW World Champion. And Jerry Lynn, a tremendous professional wrestler, an incredibly nice man. I had a wonderful experience with him just after ECW died when I was a writer, a reporter for my college newspaper, and I had a pro wrestling column. He was working a very out of the way, completely nothing indie show. He was the only name on it, and he let me do quite a lengthy interview with him after the show, and could not have been a nicer guy and a more normal guy for someone who wrestled in ECW. But this is at a point where he is a very, for Jerry Lynn standards, edgy character, and he ends his promos with a death metal yell as he calls himself the ECW World Champion. So it was, yeah.
It was fine. I love Jerry Lynn, and I was super happy when he won the ECW World Championship. And so but never a great promo. And we've got Just Incredible with Francine. They say they're going to win. Sandman has a promo. He says he's going to win.
Well, hold on. This promo was one of the first moments where I had a couple of realizations. I have not gone back and watched a lot of ECW in many years, and I was as hardcore of an ECW fan as you can be. Jeremy, you mentioned the cult. I bought in from reading the After Mags before I ever saw an ECW show. My first time seeing ECW on television was in 1996 in a Chili's in suburban Chicago. When I went with my dad, they were going to be showing the Blackhawks game on television. It was against the Philadelphia Flyers, so they had the Philadelphia channel tuned early. And I walked into Chili's, and what did I see on the TV screen? Too Cold Scorpio wrestling Sabu in the ECW arena. And I told my dad, we have to sit in the bar and watch this. And we did. And my love only grew from there. They got TV in Chicago in mid-1998. All that to say, I was as hardcore of an ECW fan as you could be. Watching this promo with Just Incredible and Francine, it was cringing as much as you could be.
Cringing.
The story here, if you can call it that, was that Francine was not going to let Justin Credible have sex with her until he won the world title and brought the belt to her. And Justin Credible was extremely visibly frustrated backstage. That was a setup to this professional wrestling battle that was going to occur.
Yes, his winning the title was his second goal.
Yes, it was the means to an end.
That's correct. Sandman says he's going to win in his Sandman fashion. And then we got to a Steve Carino promo where he was interrupted by Dawn Marie, and he's determined to become champion. This Dawn Marie, Steve Carino, Jack Victory pairing didn't do much for me. But,
oh my God. Okay, so this is the biggest disagreement we've had yet on this show since we've been doing it, meaning this podcast. There is nothing I loved more in life at this point, and I still enjoyed it greatly now. Going back, the Jack Victory, Steve Carino pairing, absolute money. Jack Victory with the peace sign and the high spot catchphrase, the whole I love it. This is another thing that you must know if you're listening as going into the show is that in November of 2000 and for a while beforehand, Steve Carino was without a doubt my favorite professional wrestler in the entire world. So I was hyped about the chances of my guy winning the world title in front of me here in November of 2000 in suburban Chicago.
And we do agree that I love Steve Carino as well. Just the high spot was over and over and over again, as it wore out its welcome, is what I'm trying to say.
Understandable. While I do not agree, I can see your point.
And we cut live to the building where we're in the Odeum in Villa Park, which is suburban Chicago. It's a venue that both you and I know very well. We've been to a couple of ECW shows there. We've been to Ring of Honor shows there. We've been to a lot of pro wrestling at the Odeum in Villa Park. This show drew 4,600 fans, 2,600 paid, for a total gate of 122,000.
And that's quite a bit less than the previous time they had been in that arena, Jeremy. I'm not sure if that's where you were going, but I do want to mention that before we start getting through everything, that Anarchy Rules, which is still one of my favorite live shows I've ever been to, and one of the best shows in ECW history, that drew 6,000 at the Odeum, ECW's biggest crowd ever. And the other thing to note about that show, as we talk about ECW being on the decline, you look at the roster of talent at Anarchy Rules 1999 as compared to just over a year later. This is a list of the names that were in ECW at that point in 1999 that were not here in November of 2000. Lance Storm, Sabu, Mike Awesome, Masato Tanaka, Taz, Raven, and Rob Van Dam. None of those men were on this show.
What a difference a year makes. Holy cow. And I remember that Anarchy Rules show. I was there, and just, wow, what a difference a year makes when you look at when we run down this show and you see the roster that they put out here. I think you described it as paper thin in our conversation before the show.
Yes. We talked about on the AWA Super Slam, whatever, Super Sunday show. Yep. We talked about where AWA was going, and that in a couple of years from that point in 1983, their roster would be completely picked dry. ECW was at that point where they had been picked dry and then some by November of 2000.
And this was the first ECW pay-per-view since they had lost their national television.
Yes, on TNN.
The crowd is on its feet, though, chanting ECW, ECW. They're trying to will it to happen.
Yes, that is the theme of this show, by the way. If you go back and watch this show, it is a live, hot ECW rabid crowd in suburban Chicago, Illinois, and they so desperately want ECW to be what they remember it to be, and they're doing their best, but the product isn't quite there with them.
Rob Van Dam, by far the company's biggest star, was in Thailand filming a martial arts movie.
which is fascinating. I would assume that they tried for Jean-Claude, he wasn't available, and they got Rob instead.
this this made the show feel even more light on stars than usual. Joey Styles is in the ring with Joel Gertner to welcome us to the show. Gertner introduces himself with innuendo, as he always does, and Simon Diamond comes out.
Another man that I was a huge fan of at the time. I completely forgot that Simon Diamond had ever existed until he came out here on the show. I had zero recollection of him, and then I was like, oh yeah, I was a huge fan of that guy. I thought he was going to be something and turned out to not be.
Now, he's got a problem. That was his shtick.
Yes.
He claimed his partner, Swinger, had a broken orbital bone at the hands of Joey Matthews and Christian York, and then he took credit for putting Tommy Dreamer out for 10 weeks, quote, ending his career. Chicago tells him to shut the F up. and
Part of his whole thing here is that he was mad at the announcers, at Joey Styles and Joel Gertner in particular, saying that he had done all of these things. He had taken out Tommy Dreamer, and the announcers, they did not give him any credit for it. They didn't put him over, which that's one of the other incredibly annoying things on this show. And again, I guess you have to look at it through the prism of 2000 or, around this time period. They are so desperate to use every possible insider term to let you know how cool they are on this show.
Gertner with an insult. Diamond punches Gertner. And the highlight was Joey Styles defending Gertner by jumping on Diamond's back. But Swinger with a chair chases Styles away. And so Swinger and Diamond, they're going to Pillmanize Gertner's arm. They've got his arm in the chair, and Diamond's about to jump off the top onto it to break his arm. But music hits. Fake Alice in Chains Man in the Box on this version.
A much better version knockoff than a lot of the other music we would hear
this was a great Alice in Chains knockoff. So Tommy Dreamer comes in for the save, and
in very disheveled street clothes, looking like a man who had in fact not been able to wrestle for 10 weeks.
C.W. Anderson comes in, gives Dreamer a spine buster, puts him in an arm bar. York and Matthews make the save, and we roll right into our opener. Matthews and York versus Swinger and Simon Diamond.
Yes, and Joey Matthews and Christian York, if you're not overly aware, obviously Joey Matthews went on to have a more significant career after this than Christian York, but they were from the same area of the country as the Hardys, came up through similar means in the pro wrestling business, and they were very, very similar, at least trying to be very similar to Matt and Jeff Hardy, and boy, did the crowd let them know that.
It started out fast with double suicide dives to the outside. No commentary at first because it takes
Joey
Styles
had to get back to the booth.
It takes Styles a while to get to his broadcast position. So Diamond hits Matthews with 2 suplexes, then picks him up for a third and drops him face first, and he hit face first.
Yes.
That was brutal.
I haven't seen too many times where a guy takes a front face suplex, and in this case, a sit out front face suplex, and almost takes it more on the top of his head than you would see a guy take a brain buster. Ooh. This was nasty.
Don Callis, aka Cyrus, is the first voice that we hear, and I was very excited to hear him. I love me some Don Callis on commentary.
I do as well. I will say, though, that this is the reverse of what we talked about in recent weeks on this podcast with Jerry Lawler, in that I thought Don Callis became a much better announcer later years when he had his run in New Japan. He was good here, but oh my God, was he over the top with the insider terms.
He was, and I got excited because I was ready for Don Callis New Japan era late 2000s here. But no, it was, you're right. It was a very different character, and he was coming off of his run as the authority figure for the TNN network.
Yes.
But they had been canceled, so now he had no role, so they were moving him into the broadcast position. So we've got Cyrus in the booth, and we've got the finish comes when Matthews hits a top rope Rana on Diamond, but York was on the top rope of the near corner, and he got crotched by Swinger, which
Yeah, I think
allows.
he was going to be going for like a sort of 2000s version of a Power and Glory type of finisher where you have, one move takes the guy down to the mat off one corner and then he's going to come off with a splash or an elbow or a moonsault or something, but we don't know if that was even the idea because the camera completely missed what was happening.
Absolutely. And when we did get to see, we saw C.W. Anderson interfering with a spine buster on Matthews. Diamond and Swinger hit the problem solver for the pin.
Which is basically a 3D, but it's a DDT finishing it off instead of a neck breaker.
So the bad guys continue to triple team York and Matthews. I don't know where Tommy Dreamer is. I was waiting for him, but it doesn't matter because Kid Cash comes out to make the save. So Kid Cash is out there. Ref gets on his knees in the ring, and Cash runs, jumps off the ref's back onto the top rope, and does a huge dive down the aisleway onto all the guys from the opening match.
Yes, this was awesome. This was basically him using the referee as a chair in a Sabu triple jump moonsault type of deal, but not a moonsault, obviously. We also were blessed with more insider terms. First, we had, as Kid Cash comes out to make the save, Joey Styles says ECW is so chaotic that he can't believe it's still on pay-per-view, which I guess you could take that a lot of different ways. Then we have, it's either him or Cyrus, I can't remember which, says, can anyone in this company follow a format?
Yeah, right.
Because let's tell everybody that this show is formatted. That'll make me more emotionally invested in the product.
And this fight rolls right into C.W. Anderson versus Kid Cash. And so we get a quote from Cyrus. Joey, you're later than a rat's period. Wow.
Yeah, that was
ECW.
That was a theme too on this show. It was ECW, but it was like the early days, even to, I would say, like 9 through 98, maybe even the beginning of 99. Like ECW wasn't trying to be edgy and dangerous. Like they weren't trying hard to. They just were. That was the vibe they legitimately put off. Whereas once we get here into late 2000, it feels like they are trying so hard to tell you how dangerous and edgy they are, but it just comes off like a 12-year-old swearing for the first time.
It totally does.
It's just not
which is also a theme of the promos later. We'll mention those.
It felt to me like when you watched a lot of indie companies right after ECW died, or even when XPW was trying to be whatever they were going to be, so many of them tried hard to be ECW, but it just seemed like a bad imitation. Here, there were times, and again, there's moments, including this match itself, where things are very good, but there are times where it feels like they're trying hard to be themselves and failing.
This match was fantastic.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed everything about this. Some of the big highlights were a Hurricanrana on the floor by Cash. No mats around the ring.
Off the top
and
straight to the floor.
Yeah, there's no mats around the ring there. That's cement floor at these ECW shows. And we had Cash diving onto Anderson into the crowd. We had a lot of just spectacular moves by Kid Cash. And late in the match, we had a spine buster by C.W. Anderson for only a near fall, but big crowd reaction. Kid Cash wins the match with a tornado DDT. The match was long. It started to drag. It started to feel long in spots. It went 10 minutes and 47 seconds, but Kid Cash was absolutely spectacular.
Oh, yeah. No, he was watching this. You could see that if ECW had continued, he was going to be one of the major stars going forward. Not only was he spectacular, but the crowd was with him every step of the way. They reacted to him like he was a huge star. C.W. Anderson was solid in everything that he did. It was always funny because they would hint at like he's got that Anderson lineage or he's got that Anderson tradition, but they would never come out and like try to say that he was an Anderson, which he wasn't. Other things I thought that were pretty entertaining about this match, that huge delay vertical superplex off the top from C.W. Anderson was fantastic. Uh, a
Big
thing that I
reaction
found,
too. That got a big. The
yeah,
crowd went nuts for that one.
that's one of those moves that even here in 2020 still gets a big reaction. Like there's things that were a finisher or a move that could potentially finish a match in 2000 that we just people don't take seriously still. Superplex is one of those that people still do take seriously. I also was very distracted by the teenage nerds working the building that were in front of the giant November to Remember sign directly across from the hard cam, which you still see now when you go to shows at the Odeum. Like they still have the same program, like a lot of kids working the show, but it was just weird and awkward seeing it here. The other thing I thought was really cool about this match was that Kid Cash won with a high impact move that wasn't his finisher. I am a huge proponent of mixing those type of finishes in whatever wrestling company you're watching from time to time, where it's not a finisher. It's also not like a flash pin cradle. It's just like a generally, effective, impactful move that you should believe could be a finish. And when you do that, then later on down the line in the show or further shows down the line, people will actually buy something other than a guy hitting his finisher as the end of the match.
Hot commodity with Elektra.
Oh God. And this is where we start moving into the not ready for anything close to prime time acts, at least the majority of this act.
So hot commodity is Easy Money and Julio De Niro and Chris Hamrick. So it's Easy Money, Julio De Niro, and their southern friend, Chris Hamrick.
Yeah. He has nicknames and move descriptions that are a bit more I don't know the best way to describe them other than to say they wouldn't work in 2020, and thank God they wouldn't work. It's actually pretty disturbing that they were thought to have worked here in the year 2000.
I don't think they worked in 2000 either.
No.
They were managed by Elektra, and fun fact, Elektra was married and has a kid with the late Big Dick Dudley.
Wow. So, did not know that.
Did not either. They're taking on this team of Danny Doring and Roadkill after confusion and incorrect ring announcing. We finally learned that it's a 3-on-2 match, but I was wildly confused.
DeAngelis, the ring announcer here is, if you were expecting to get Bob Ortiz, you did not get Bob Ortiz here. Steven DeAngelis was the sort of the backup ring announcer for ECW. We'd see him at times at shows at ECW Arena, other shows. Not all that great, kind of sweaty and jittery, and just it didn't really work. And yeah, we had a ring introduction where they're calling it like he's basically introducing it like it's a tag match. 3-on-2.
Chris Hamrick's just hanging. And then, no, it's really a 3-on-2 match. And here we go. Yeah, go ahead.
The match itself is important, but to me, I'd actually like to spend more time talking about the aesthetic of this match.
If you mean aesthetic, you mean Easy Money's gear?
It's part of it. Well, there's a lot of gear concerns in this match. First off, Chris Hamrick. We're not even gonna get into describing the symbols on the man's gear, but as we described to you what his character was all about, you can imagine. That then leads into dastardly Danny Doring, one of the graduates of the ECW House of Hardcore, wearing, like, if you were a mid-'80s jobber in the NWA, you would laugh and make fun of the gear that Danny Doring was wearing and saying that it looked too jobberish. Like, it's too jobberish, like that bad. He is teaming with Roadkill, who is introduced as the angry Amish chicken plucker.
Yep.
Roadkill, who's basically doing his best Big Bubba Rogers or Mr. Hughes impersonation, but with an Amish hat. So there's that.
And a beard, yeah.
And a beard, yep, a nice big Amish beard. And Roadkill was perfectly fine as a wrestler.
Totally
perfectly fine big man in a tag team. No problem with him. He was over. Perfectly fine. They're taking on Julio De Niro, who he's wearing, your garden variety long red trunks, and his partner, Easy Money.
Oh God, this gear.
He is like the gear. I think here what I wrote was the gear on Easy Money, JFC, you know what that means. Gold shiny hat, gold suspenders, black and gold sparkly pants. What?
No, you're not doing it justice. It's like regular wrestling trunks with chaps built in, but only on the outside of the thighs. It's just gross. It's gross.
It's gross.
I think I texted
weird.
you like
You
while I was
did.
watching this match. I'm like,
You
Easy
did.
Money's gear is gross. I think that's
Well, then the craziest thing about Easy Money is, right, so here he's got horrible gross gear, and he's pretty nondescript in this match. You fast forward to a few months later, he goes to WCW in the dying days of WCW, when the last 3 months of the company that actually started to, from an in-ring and product standpoint, turn things around a bit, but it's just too far gone to recover from. But he goes to WCW wearing the same gear as a face, Jason Jett, and he gets wildly over. Like, he is one of the absolute highlights of the last 3 months of WCW. You would not know that watching this show.
absolutely not. It's 3-on-2 for about a minute before Spike Dudley comes out, takes off a knee brace, runs down, and evens the match up to be 3-on-3.
And he's the commissioner for some reason.
He's the ECW
I don't know.
commissioner.
It's never explained. It's
mentioned in commentary. I had no recollection of this whatsoever, but okay.
There's not a lot that I think we need to discuss about this match. Feel free if you want
There's
to.
a couple of moments in here that were pretty good. Hamrick coming off the ropes, Spike sidesteps him, kicks the legs out from underneath him, and Hamrick goes flying through the top and middle ropes all the way to the floor, landing on his back so hard.
That is the signature bump of Chris Hamrick. There was somewhere floating around on Twitter, someone put a compilation of when Chris Hamrick was a jobber in the WWF. He did this bump in like matches on Superstars, and it's insane. There's one, I can't remember who it was against, and I should have gone back and looked, where like it happens, and I don't think the guy that he was wrestling had any idea he was going to do it, and he just stops and he just looks horrified by what he sees Chris Hamrick do here. So this was like the early days Mick Foley Nesty plunge, but even worse.
Easy Money also had a nice flip dive over the top onto the pile on the floor, which is impressive for a dude his size. That was a good spot, and the crowd wanted Spike Dudley in there so bad. He got the hot tag, but Easy Money with the chop block on an injured knee. I'm always a fan of that.
Yeah.
The finish comes with Doring hitting Elektra with his move called the bareback.
It is one of the worst moves you've ever seen in professional wrestling. Other than like, so for one, the name is just incredibly stupid. But here's the deal. Like, imagine, when you see in AEW Jake Hager use the like the side choke, the standing side choke. Imagine that position, right? And you're holding the guy, then you just jump up and fall on your ass. And this is apparently supposed to hurt.
Spike hits the acid drop on Hamrick, gets the pin. Like you mentioned, nothing match. 8 minutes, 23 seconds on that. Nothing match.
Yes. Then we go backstage to one of the few rare high spots of late stage ECW in terms of like them creating a legitimate star that felt like ECW, Rhino. And he cuts a promo here, and I had forgotten how much I loved Rhino's promos in ECW, because basically what happened was he would get about a millimeter away from the camera. He would scream. He would tell you the horrifically horrible, vile things that he was going to do to his opponent in excruciating detail. And then here, he kept banging his head on the locker, and he was talking about how he says, "I'm done brawling. I'm going," but then he talks about these things that can only be described as brawling that I'm not going to repeat on this family podcast. But then he says that he's going to show him how he wrestles. But it's fine because he's terrifying, and I love it.
Absolutely. But he also falls into the pattern of everyone else on the show in trying to fit F-bombs into a promo where it feels forced and everybody's doing it, so it doesn't have any impact. If
other guys weren't doing it and it was him doing it, this would have been 10 times more effective. 100%. And it's believable coming from him, as opposed to some of the other guys on this show. So I thoroughly enjoyed that promo, but then things fall off the proverbial cliff because out comes Lou E. Dangerously, and he brings Chris Chetty with blonde hair, trying to look tough. They inform us, if we had forgotten, that he is in fact the first graduate of the ECW House of Hardcore and the cousin of Taz. And the best way I can describe Lou E. Dangerously is just a very hacky, terrible. Like, you can't even call it an impersonation of Paul E, because he's wearing clothes that make him look somewhat like Paul E, but literally that's the only thing that's similar.
Chetty proposes to make this a loser leaves ECW match.
Yes.
And before I even know who his opponent is, and we find out his opponent is his former partner, Nova. So Nova versus Chris Chetty, loser leaves ECW. We had some good moments in this match with there was a Piscotti over the top by Nova that misses. You had Chetty trying to spear Nova, and he went headfirst into the guardrail, and he starts bleeding.
Nasty. And by the way, we should mention that these two men were tag team partners. Chris Chetty turned on Nova, as every one of Nova's tag team partners had done. We are informed of that by Joey Styles, and that is what led to this blood feud that then got sort of blown off a bit prematurely here.
So Chetty's bleeding, which is another problem with this show, is that everybody bled in every single match. And so then the main event, when you wanted a big, bloody, crazy main event, was like, dude, I saw Chris Chetty bleeding earlier. I'm about to see everybody bleed in every single match. So it lost a lot of its impact. So I was not thrilled with that. You had Chetty hit a great super kick when Lou was holding Nova's leg. Nova turned around and ate a great super kick.
Chetty, that's the one thing Chetty did very well. He had variations of kicks. He had a great super kick. He had that sort of that rainbow crescent kick that Booker T would do that you really don't see anyone else do. He threw a great axe kick as well. So there were elements of Chris Chetty that were good, but this was yet another scenario where, because the roster is so thin, you had guys that were in more prominent positions on the show than they probably should have been. And I guess and this match was fine, but you can make the argument really that both of these guys were a bit in over their heads. Talent-wise, as compared to their push here.
Nova with a top rope kryptonite crunch gets the 3 count, and that was a scary looking move. Almost murdering Chetty on that one.
It was a top rope kryptonite crunch, and they hit it, but there was some, stumbliness on the way down that had you certainly concerned momentarily that this could go a bit sideways.
So Chetty's gone from ECW, and this actually turned out to be Chetty's final ECW match. He legit had taken a WWF developmental deal at this point. So
yeah, and I remember that was rumored at the time going into this, which was also obviously nowhere near as big of a deal, but it kind of harkened back to the last time ECW had a major show in Chicago when Taz was on his way out. Everybody knew it, and no one knew how they were going to get out of that with him being the world champion. And, that ended up with a 3-way with Tanaka and Mike Awesome, and Mike Awesome winning the title.
New Jack's in the back. He's the opponent for Rhino later, and he's bringing his toys. He's gonna gut you like a doctor and eat your guts like a buzzard.
Yes,
right,
there was that quote. He also talks about once he wins the belt, what he's going to do. And he says things such as he is going to pawn the belt. He's going to gamble with it. He's going to give the ECW World Television title to a hooker, quote unquote. And he says, I'm going to do everything you aren't supposed to do with it.
And then there's this match.
Well, before that, we get to hear about them ripping up ripping up format sheets some more.
We have to watch the Baldies, DeVito and Angel, take on Balls Mahoney and Chili Willy. With the only way to win this match is to put someone through a table that is on fire.
Yes. This was a big deal in ECW, the flaming tables at the time, and also particularly ECW in Chicago. The very first ECW show in Chicago featured the Dudleys versus, I believe it was Balls Mahoney and Spike Dudley, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a flaming table situation there. So the crowd in Chicago was rabid to see flaming tables. My recollection going into this was that back then I thought that the Baldies were the worst act in ECW history.
They're not great.
They were, and again, they worked hard here. So I'm not saying they didn't work hard, but they were the epitome of ECW 2000 trying too hard to be hard and tough and edgy and mean and extreme. And instead of just coming off a bit cartoonish and laughable. Yeah. And then the other thing is on the other side, you have Balls Mahoney and Chili Willy. And it's the exact opposite with me where like at the time I thought Chili Willy was terrible. And I watched this show and he was one of my favorite wrestlers on this show.
I was a Chili Willy supporter. I think
it was just the name that did it for me. I just couldn't take it seriously. But then looking back, I'm like, I love this dude, and I want to see more of him in like territory style wrestling.
We had some unprotected chair shots to the head, which were pretty cringeworthy in 2020.
Did we ever have that in this match? My God.
And then basically just the fights in the crowd, and the highlight was Balls struggling to get over the guardrail. I did chuckle.
Well, it was the highlight, and it was also one of the only things that we were actually able to see on the broadcast version of this, because for a show that was going to have crowd brawling, and for them knowing that like 60% of this match was going to take place going throughout the Odeum, they did not do a very good job of having cameramen in place or ready to be able to do this at all. Part of it too is that my guess, I don't remember, but my guess is that they didn't use the full building setup like they did in 1999 for the 6,000. This was 4,000 people, and I think they only used the half arena setup that they had used when they ran the Odeum in 98 and like Ring of Honor is used. And so these people were packed in so tightly that when they were brawling through the crowd, it was hard for them to get around. And I guess, to play devil's advocate, I don't know where you would have been able to position cameras in the middle of that crowd. It was tight.
Mahoney and DeVito are bleeding again every match. And Chili Willy takes a powerbomb through 2 chairs onto the cement. Very ouch. That was brutal. Back in the ring, Chili is setting up the table, and Chili and Balls spray the table down with the lighter fluid.
They drenched this table
like 2 bottles.
Full bottles. 2 completely full bottles, completely drenched.
Balls and Chili both light the table on fire, and Balls power bombs Angel through the flaming table for the win. Angel legit suffers first and secondary burns on his back and head.
It was horrible. And the thing too is like, so when it happens, they have like the regular hard cam shot, and then right as the impact is happening, they switch to this like diagonal shot. And you're thinking like, okay, like it looks bad, but like the flame went out at least visibly right away. So it's like, okay, maybe, it wasn't that bad. And then after they get through the long run of replays of every chair shot and, everything else, they show 3 or 4 different close up angles of this. And it was horrific. He goes through, sometimes you see in these flaming table situations in ECW where they light the table on fire, and then by the time they get the guy up and power bomb him or whatever through it largely burns out. And it's just, it's not much. He went through this table fully engulfed in flames. The table is fully engulfed in flames, and he was too by the end of it.
In the back, Sinister Minister James Mitchell is with Tajiri, and the Thanksgiving theme here in November, he's thankful that the FBI will lose to Tajiri and Mikey Whipwrecht. Mikey's on a table surrounded by fire with an apple in his mouth and his legs and arms tied up like he's about to be spit roast. This was okay.
This is better than it sounds. I will tell you unequivocally, and I know I talked about Steve Carino, and he was my favorite wrestler back then, and I love the Carino Jack Victory act, but by far the best thing in ECW in this era, looking back at it, was Sinister Minister, Tajiri, and Mikey Whipwrecht together. They were so great. The promos were always insane. This was nowhere near the best one that they did. They had some incredible, just creative and disturbing promos on ECW TV. Had great matches as a team. I remember the ECW Tag Team Tournament The tag title tournament at the Hammerstein Ballroom, which I believe was a few months prior to this, was fantastic. So I was hyped when I saw these men and knew that we were going to be getting this match.
But the match before we get that match is Rhino defending his TV title against New Jack.
Oh God, that's right. I had blocked that out already, particularly given the match and then the dubbed music that we had, because if you remember, New Jack's music used to play throughout his entire match, and instead we had a dubbed version, completely different, and it stuck in my head more than I would have liked it to.
I used to love that New Jack's music played throughout his matches. I thought that was a unique, cool thing.
And I would have loved that here too.
But yeah, this generic overdub rap song was
very
horrendous.
repetitive.
Yes,
it was a downgrade,
big time. So a lot of brawling, a lot of plunder. You've got New Jack bringing tables into the ring. There's no Cyrus in this match, is what I noticed, because this match is what it is with just New Jack and plunder. So I was paying attention to the broadcasters, and there was no Cyrus, just Joey Styles on the commentary.
Well, maybe they only ECW at this late stage with all the debts they were incurring. They only had 2 audio channels, and they had to use one of them for the New Jack music. I don't know. So, I will say that as much as I like Cyrus, I always thought in ECW that it was far better off with Joey Styles solo than with a color commentator. And I just, for whatever reason, Styles with a color commentator, it just never worked for me.
New Jack ends up staple gunning the referee in the head and beats up the ref. Rhino gets hit with a guitar, but it doesn't hurt him. He's unfazed. And I immediately screamed because I hate when a guitar explodes and there's powder going everywhere. I think that looks absolutely insane. No guitars ever do that. I hate that. So that happened here in cartoonish fashion. And
I'm assuming that guitar was probably laying in the same area. I guess we'd have to do some time traveling here, but that spot on the Vengeance 2001 show where Rob Van Dam leaps off the balcony onto the Undertaker, and they land on that pallet that just goes up in smoke.
It goes up in smoke. It's near that, yeah.
they were manufactured in the same building, I guess.
Rhino gores New Jack through the table. Ref counts 3. Still TV champion is Rhino.
Yeah, there were other things that happened in this match, but it was just violence, and
it's New Jack.
I will
plunder.
say that my favorite part of the match was New Jack using a snap mirror to set up then put a cookie sheet on Rhino's crotch and hit him with a stick on the cookie sheet. I enjoyed that little bit of pro wrestling in the middle of this. Also was amused, as someone who spent way too much time going to indie shows in Chicago, that Danny Daniels, who had a run in IWA Mid-South and then went on to run AAW in Chicago, he was here as a replacement ref after referee H.C. Loke got staple gunned. Danny Daniels also got beat up in this match. So I was greatly amused by that.
ECW tag team titles. The FBI are the tag team champions.
Well, one thing I want to briefly mention before that, very briefly, we had a backstage interview with Steve Carino. Sandman catches him in his locker room drinking his beers, and then they brawl. Then we have the first of many attempts to explain the rules of the main event. I won't spoil it, but I'll just say they try so hard on this broadcast to explain the rules of the main event, and then the main event tries so hard to nullify the rules that they explain throughout this show.
If you've listened to any of our past shows, you know I'm a stickler for rules and understanding the rules and catching me up on rules before we get into these matches. And
the explanations of rules on the broadcast matching the rules that we're actually going to see instead sporting contest.
Yes, I feel this is just trolling me at this point. So the ECW Tag Team Championship are the FBI as the tag team champions against the challengers Mikey Whipwrecht and Tajiri. However, no James Mitchell, the Sinister Minister, because Joey Styles says that the FBI cut off his finger.
Jesus.
Take me into the arena, Adam, during this show. What happened?
So we are, and it's even before the show, and it's outside of the arena. We are lined up very early for this show, and time goes by. Time goes by. The time when the doors are supposed to open goes by. Doors don't open.
It's
I don't
warm
remember
in
the exact.
Chicago in
It,
November, right? So
yeah,
people are totally fine with being outside.
yeah, exactly. Very warm in November in Chicago. So people are getting restless. And then we also know this is a pay-per-view, so it has to start at a certain time. So it's like, what the hell is going on? Then at one point, an ambulance pulls up to the building, and all kinds of rumors start flying through the crowd. Again, this is 2000. This is pre-smartphones, but so it's, a rumor starts at the front of the line, makes it to the back, and God knows, where it ends up. But we finally get in the building very late. Like I said, the ambulance leaves. No one has any idea what happened except for a million different rumors about overdoses, whatever, brawls backstage, whatever. Fast forward to after this show, what we find out, and I'm going to read here from, of all people, Alex Marvez of AEW fame, was a reporter. He had an article in the South Florida Sun Sentinel on December 22nd of 2000. The article starts, "Fire isn't always the devil's friend. Jim Mitchell, aka Extreme Championship Wrestling manager, the Sinister Minister, suffered a severe hand injury 7 weeks ago when a flame-throwing device detonated while he was loading it backstage before the November to Remember pay-per-view show." So there's our answer. James Mitchell then goes on to explain, "I had shrapnel and burns in my hand and abdomen," said Mitchell, who lost the tips of 2 fingers and had nerve damage. "I had practiced with the thing at home hundreds of times." Adam Summers note, "That's disturbing as hell." Back to the article. "It was just a freak accident, but as always seems to be the case with me, I'm a lucky devil and I beat the odds. It could have been potentially much worse." The article then goes on to briefly say, ECW owner Paul Heyman was criticized for airing footage of Mitchell being treated backstage by medical personnel. This aired later on. This wasn't on the broadcast. It aired later on TV, and also claiming that the damage was inflicted by wrestlers of full-blooded Italians. Mitchell, though, defends Heyman's decision to use the injury as part of a wrestling angle. "I don't know why people were so upset," he said. "You couldn't see anything."
You mentioned he lost a piece of his thumb and forefinger, burning his hand, and had nerve damage. In addition, when he was being rushed to the hospital in the ambulance, he was bleeding badly because it had cut his wrist and severed an artery. Oof. And he went into shock. This is a report from Dave Meltzer on the same incident. He said luckily the shrapnel didn't penetrate into his internal organs. He had exploratory surgery the next morning, and it's believed there's nerve damage on the 2 fingers, and he might need a nerve transplant at some time. Yeah, so that is what caused all of the commotion beforehand. This is why he was not on the show, and they tried to blame it on the FBI cutting off his fingers during the broadcast.
Imagine being the neighbors of the Sinister Ministers, or the Sinister Minister. First, it's James Vandenberg. He's James Vandenberg, Sinister Minister. He's crazy. But imagine living next to someone who tried out loading fire into this device hundreds of times at home.
We got green mist from Tajiri. I always love that. And so did everybody else, because my gosh, there's a double team early on by Mikey and Tajiri, and people love Tajiri.
Oh, yeah.
He is so popular. And he was one of my favorites at the time. Absolutely still is. We had great chain wrestling with Tajiri and Guido. Tajiri tried to jump over Mikey Whipwreck, who was holding on to Guido, balancing across the top rope. He's supposed to jump over Mikey and land on the back of Guido, but came up way short, and they all crumpled to the mat. That was not great. Guido has his head sticking between the middle rope and the bottom rope. And Mikey's on the floor, holds 2 chairs on each side of Guido's head, making like a Guido head sandwich between the chairs. And Mikey drop kicks one side of the chair as Tajiri kicks the other.
This was awesome. It
It
was
was
disturbing, but it was great. And this was Mikey Whipwreck and Tajiri were again like the ultimate odd couple on paper, but had incredible chemistry as a tag team, and were always coming up with different varieties of this type of offense, unique, innovative double teams involving a chair or multiple chairs. We also had, I think it was before this, or maybe it was right around the same time in the match, the wheelbarrow off the apron to the guardrail, which was
oh
disturbing as hell.
yeah, no, that was Tony Mamaluke trying to hit Mikey with a baseball slide. He
Yes,
gets
that was it.
caught, and he basically, yeah, pulls him out, drops him across their sternum midsection first across the guardrail, and it was, if you've seen Tony Mamaluke take a beating, this was absolutely brutal.
Oh yeah, we should also mention, by the way, at the start of this match, they informed us that Little Guido, Maritato, as they were starting to call him at that point, they were trying to move away from him being a comedy character, so they gave him the last name. He was a hell of a wrestler, and they reference, which is true, that he was a student of Billy Robinson, and he actually did do like shoot style wrestling in Japan. And then they mentioned that Tony Mamaluke was a student of Dean Malenko.
In the ring, Mikey Whipwreck hits a whippersnapper, which is basically a stunner,
Yes.
off the top rope onto both of the FBI at the same time. And Whipwreck has an injured shoulder at this point, and so the match is stopped, and a stretcher's brought out, and EMTs neck brace him, board him onto a gurney, and take him out.
In about 12 seconds. That's always the biggest tell in pro wrestling, that a serious neck injury is in fact a wrestling angle, when they have EMTs come out and manhandle a man's injured neck and strap him to a board and immobilize him like in less time than it took him to come out for his entrance.
Yeah, the joke was always late '90s WWF. You knew it was a fake injury when Sergeant Slaughter was the doctor.
Yes.
Yeah, same
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
So, so as soon as Mikey's taken out, the crowd is so concerned they immediately start chanting for Super Crazy.
Yeah, exactly. That I felt bad for Mikey here. Obviously, it was an angle, but still, it's like
And the
we're
worst
supposed to
kept
be getting.
secret that Super
Yeah.
Crazy was coming back.
Well, they said, yeah, they Cyrus earlier on in the show, because Super Crazy was supposed to be in a different match early on in the card, and Cyrus just in passing, as they were talking about all the different changes on the show, said that Super Crazy had been like denied entrance into the country, had been sent back due to like a visa or immigration issue. So that was supposed to throw people off to the scent of Crazy being there, but they didn't tell the people in the building that, so people
No.
were they were ready for some Super Crazy here.
Welcome back, Chance. Super Crazy runs wild. He hit his bottom, middle rope, top rope moonsault. Crazy gets the hot tag. He's hitting springboard moves everywhere. Super Crazy is so much fun. I loved watching him just run wild in this match.
Crazy and Tajiri were again, we talk about some of the few highlights of the later stages of ECW. They were at the absolute, top of the list. There were also had some crazy double team moves here. We had, and again, Crazy and Tajiri were longtime rivals, so that was part of this too. It's like, oh, they're going to team. How are they going to get along? We had this pop up like X Factor, I guess you would say, that was just ridiculous. We also had a Tree of Woe for that Crazy setup, Tajiri hitting a baseball slide. So a lot of things here that for a team that hadn't teamed together often, if ever, that worked out pretty well.
Mama Luke was launched into the third row by Super Crazy, and
That was it was funny too, because that was one of those deals where that happens and then you expect there to be a dive afterward, and I don't think there was.
no, because Crazy was chased in quotes by Big Sal there into the crowd. They start brawling, and Crazy ends up climbing to do a moonsault from the balcony to Sal on the floor, and the camera missed most of it.
Yes.
I would be so pissed if I were Super Crazy that I just risked my health for this move, and the cameras almost completely missed it.
Yeah, it amazes me that they didn't find a way to have a camera somewhere. Again, I've been in the upper reaches, the bowels of the Odium, and there
Stop
are
bragging, Adam.
places.
Stop bragging.
There are places, yeah, that's something to brag about. That's the tour of historic Odeum Sports and Entertainment Expo Center in Phillip Park, Illinois. But there are areas where they could have put a camera that would not have been like the cameraman would have been in danger. You wouldn't have had fans there, and it would have clearly shown him landing. Basically, all we had was the hard cam pulling back, and so we do see the insanity of how high Super Crazy is up and how far he's coming down, but we don't actually see him land, and we almost don't really know that Big Sal's even there.
No, we missed the whole thing. In the ring, we get a top rope draping bulldog on Tajiri. Guido gets the pin. I forgot to mention Guido was bleeding also. Guido gets the pin. Still the champs, the FBI.
Super abrupt finish, by the way. And I guess it made sense because Crazy had, let his temper get the best of him and moonsaulted off the balcony to take out Big Sal, who was interfering in the match but wasn't actually in the match. But this is one of those deals where I did not expect that move to be the finish. I will say that when they were setting that move up, I thought it was going to be a much more horrifying bump than it ended up being. That made me happy, particularly on this show filled with lots of danger.
Blue Meanie and Jasmine tell us about ECW's website while taking a shower.
Yeah, that happened. And that would definitely fall into the trying too hard. When I watched that, all I could think of was the unending promos every commercial break for years on the ECW syndicated show, trying to sell us the tape of the night that Kimona Wanalea danced the top.
Oh God,
the
that's
ECW
right.
arena.
Oh, I totally remember that.
I feel like that like 10-second promo for that tape is just burned into my mind the way it was said, much like in a completely different way.
Yeah, apparently it was burned into mine, and you just brought it to the front of my mind now. Oh my gosh, I totally remember that.
I feel like the only two tapes they ever put a promo for, it was that, and then it was the Sabu Terry Funk barbed wire match where it was just like a 15-second clip with the phone number on the screen and them showing in excruciating slow motion detail Sabu being thrown back and arm first into the barbed wire.
Here it is.
This was neither of those things.
No.
This backstage promo was neither of those things.
No, it's not. It's time for our main event. Double Jeopardy match for the ECW World Title. Here are the rules, okay?
Listen up. Pay attention closely.
2 matches will be going on in the same ring at the same time. Sandman versus Steve Carino with Dawn Marie and Jack Victory. And Jerry Lynn versus Justin Credible with Francine. All 4 men can interact with each other, but you can only be eliminated by your designated opponent. The winners will then face each other for the ECW World Title. As Cyrus said, he had 2 PhDs and he was still trying to figure out what was about to go on in this main event.
Not a selling point. And I feel like anytime you have to explain a match for almost a minute, if not longer, and one of the points in the match is that there are designated opponents, you've made things too complicated for yourself as a pro wrestling promoter.
And it's time to get more confused because everyone's introduced except the Sandman, who doesn't show up.
Yes, and it appears as though, and this ends up not being the case, but it sure feels like Steven DeAngelis is just going to introduce this as a 3-way dance. And for a bit of history, or a bit of like, the idea here was ECW was trying to create another innovative match that no one had ever done before that would become like a staple. The 3-way dance. Everyone remembers when ECW did that with Sabu, Terry Funk, and Shane Douglas, and it got, it in a lot of ways, it was one of the things that put ECW on the map, got them a lot of attention. The idea was to do something similar here, but this was too clever for its own good. And then, like you said, the match itself, not only do the introductions happen, the match starts and goes on for several minutes without the Sandman there. So we have a situation where first, Jerry Lynn and Justin Credible are wrestling. Steve Carino does what any smart man would do, just hanging out in the corner. It would have been better if he would have gone full Jerry Lawler and hit under the ring, but I was fine with this. But then at a certain point, Carino just decides to get involved as he can, but there's really no benefit to him. The other thing I want to note just before we talk about the Sandman's entrance into this match is that there's another weird quirk that I don't know. Maybe it's just I think too much about these things, but if Jerry Lynn loses to Just Incredible here in this first match, these simultaneous matches that are going on, Just Incredible does not officially become the ECW World Heavyweight Champion. So there's no scenario, even though in theory you could say there's 2 title changes in this match if that's how it would go, but that's not how it's recognized.
No, that's not at all. And so like you mentioned, it's broken down into all 3 guys fighting each other, and the crowd is looking around. They find the Sandman. The music hits. In real life, it was Metallica's "Enter Sandman." Here, it's it's generic knockoff music. He's wearing a gross Budweiser tank top, and is
pants that look like he borrowed them from Matt Hardy from the same time period.
And it's a long entrance, totally killing everything that's going on in the match. These guys are trying to wrestle a 3-way match here in the ring, and nobody cares because everyone's watching the Sandman's entrance.
Well, especially too live. You have to remember at this point, ECW has been stripped of most of its stars. The Sandman had come back not terribly long before from his sojourn to WCW as Hardcore Hack. And so you have the Sandman, one of the icons of ECW. He's doing his iconic Enter Sandman entrance. And so people who have been starved to see something that feels like legitimate real ECW all night, they're finally getting it. But watching it back and just seeing the fact that this is supposed to be this historic world title match, never been done before, the need to do the full Sandman entrance completely killed the concept of the match.
Ugh. It was awful. In the ring, Lynn is cut. He's bleeding, like everybody else, and then you've got a cool sequence here where he's got Carino in the corner and he kicks him in the ribs, and then he kicks him in the ribs with his left leg, but then jumps to the middle rope, kicking Carino in the head with his right leg. It was a very cool move.
It was something that he actually used to do a lot and hadn't done in a long time, at least that I recall. Like, I remember this being a deal with Jerry Lynn back when my first recollection of seeing him was in the old Global Wrestling Federation, GWF, which aired on ESPN.
Yeah.
Actually, as we had talked about on the AWA show, the lineage of that TV deal was that AWA had it, that morphed into USWA getting it, and then that morphed into Global getting it. But Jerry Lynn had an incredible series of matches in Global with the Lightning Kid, who would go on to be the 1-2-3 Kid, who would go on to be X-Pac. And Jerry Lynn was much more of a high flyer back then, and that was one of the moves that he used.
Yeah, he is such a great wrestler here. And absolutely. I mean, this is great, Jerry Lynn. Sandman's in the ring. He hits Lynn with the Singapore cane, his kendo stick. He's finally in the ring after all of this. He hits Credible with the cane. Sandman cracks a beer, and Carino swats it out of his hand while Sandman was in mid-drink.
Favorite spot of the show.
100%.
This is Steve Carino at his best. Do want to mention, just because we're going to go through the match itself, and I don't want it to be lost, just Incredible as the ECW, one of the top guys, not the world champion here, but he had been. Felt bad for him back then in that he wasn't great, but he was good. And he was a guy that if he had been slotted right, could have been a really valuable guy in ECW for a long time. But he was pushed into that spot of being like the lead heel world champion. And it was almost an impossible role to fill. Again, he wasn't bad. I recall seeing him have several good matches as world champion, but it didn't work like they wanted to. I think in a lot of ways, they were hoping that he was going to be like, a Shane Douglas type champion. And obviously Shane Douglas had his own issues as well, but he just never really had that same presence as a world champion.
Kane shot to Carino, one to Jack Victory as well. Lynn hits an awesome tornado DDT off the second rope onto Carino. That was fantastic.
Straight out of WWF No Mercy. Like if that game wasn't motion captured, which is one of the reasons why it was so great. But if it was, you could have done that move from Jerry Lynn for sure.
Credible is bleeding all over now. Lynn and Credible are back and forth in the ring. Sandman throws a ladder at Carino in the ring. He throws Carino into the ladder that's set up in the corner. Credible ends up hitting the ladder. Sandman throws Lynn in the ladder. Suplex on the ladder by Sandman. This was crazy. A lot of big bumps here on with ladder spots.
Yes, once this match got going, once Sandman got in, it did feel like a big ECW match. I will give them that. They were working their asses off. And we'll get to it in a few moments. Sandman, he redeems himself on this show. That's all I'll say.
Sandman, you mentioned working hard. He ended up he does a slingshot somersault senton over the top onto a ladder, just crushing Steve Carino underneath. Sandman puts a piece of the guardrail into the ring, and Carino he's the last one to be busted open, and now he's busted open in the match, and Carino's in the ring. He sets up the guardrail on top of 4 chairs, so 1 chair on each corner of the guardrail piece. And
basically to levitate the guardrail rather than it sitting on the ground.
Yes, and Sandman suplexes Carino into it. Both guys hit the guardrail so hard. This was absolutely brutal.
Well, yeah, Carino takes like a back bump on the guardrail itself, which is bad enough. Sandman hits the back of his head on like the arm, or I guess the leg of the guardrail, the hard, like flat steel piece. And that to me looked even worse than what Carino took.
Tombstone by Lynn, who tries to pin Credible, but Francine jumps in to stop the referee's count, which brings in Dawn Marie, and everyone's expecting the obligatory catfight spot between Dawn Marie and Francine, but Carino says no and sends Dawn out of the ring instead. Which
a great heel and a great man.
It was a great heel move. The crowd was very angry, and Cyrus had a funny line as the match was going on. If I were scoring this, I'd have Lynn ahead on points. Which
thinking of this match with guardrails and tables and chairs, and thinking of what the scoring system would be, much like if you go back to the show that we did with the Clash of the Champions. I wonder how like Hiro Matsuda and Larry Zbyszko and Ole Anderson would have scored this match.
We had a double super kick on Jerry Lynn. At the same time, Credible gets Lynn in a tombstone as Carino gets Sandman in a neckbreaker, which is his move called the old school expulsion. Yep.
Which it's basically a reverse twist of fate. Instead of doing it ending up in a cutter, he starts the other way and it ends up in a reverse neckbreaker.
So Credible's pinning Lynn as Carino is pinning Sandman stereo 3 counts. And we've set up a match with Credible and Carino both winning their matches. Now, like you mentioned, Credible is not the champion. He just pinned the champion. He is currently not the champion.
He pinned the champion in a match. Again, remember, these are 2 separate matches. They had 2 separate referees. So he pinned the world champion in a cumulative match where the world title is on the line, but in this match, it is not. The crowd starts chanting bullshit. I don't think it's because they're sticklers for the rules like we are. No. I think it's because they're upset that the Sandman is eliminated.
And Jerry Lynn. Both of the crowd's favorites are gone, and they are not happy that Carino or Just Incredible will be the new ECW champion.
No. I will say, though, at this point, I mentioned a few minutes ago that Sandman redeems himself. From this point forward in this match, even though the Sandman is eliminated, he transforms into the greatest man alive. Because what the Sandman does is the Sandman stays at ringside, and he dedicates the next 10 minutes of his life to rallying the crowd tirelessly to make sure that this match does not die and that it gets the proper reaction that that it deserves. He is like the best manager ever pounding on the mat to rally the crowd. Like I was blown away. I
It
loved it.
needed to happen too, because
Oh, for sure.
they were so mad that they were so mad that both Sandman and Jerry Lynn were out.
Yeah.
So Carino. Oh, by the way, that's 16 minutes and 21 seconds at the first at the stereo pinfall moment. So we move into the Carino Credible match, and you've got Carino doing his Dusty Rhodes punches and bionic elbow, and Carino, he ended up backdropped over the top rope onto Lynn on the outside. Carino is an awesome bleeder with his blonde hair. It looks great every time.
Straight out of the mid 80s. Like he again, old, king of old school, obviously, and when he dyed the hair blonde and grew the dark beard and started bleeding all the time, that's what took him from being a guy who is a prelim guy / manager. He was Rhino's manager when Rhino first came.
They made mention to it at the end of the show that he was a manager and now will be the champion. Yeah.
So it was quite the transformation here from Carino, and also in match quite the transformation, because he is a dastardly heel through the first 16 and a half minutes here. And after the two faces get eliminated, he quickly becomes the de facto baby face in this match.
Credible's thrown over the top rope, and the Sandman gives him his white Russian leg sweep into the guardrail. Carino sets up a table in the ring, leaning it against the corner. There's a chop fest back and forth between these two.
This was awesome.
Lynn
and this was where they started to win the crowd over too.
Yeah, 100%. And Lynn and the Sandman, like you mentioned, were standing around the ring and just pounding on the ring to get the crowd into it.
And Francine as well was doing work on the apron as well, trying to rally the fans.
Carino with a big suplex on Credible through the table, only a 2 count. Francine into the ring for no reason whatsoever. Carino goes for a super kick. Credible pulls Francine into the line of fire. She takes the super kick.
This was amazing. She took a bump that was for the ages on this. Like, they timed this perfectly.
I just wish there was a reason she was in the ring other than to be pulled in front of the super kick.
Maybe this was the one thing that was on the format sheet that actually happened. That was the reason.
Old school expulsion again. This time Credible kicks out. Huge super kick by Credible. Kick out at 2. Old school expulsion neckbreaker again by Carino. But before he can go for the pin, Dawn Maria's in, and she gives him a low blow. Jack Victory is in, and he's yelling at Dawn, wanting an explanation. She gives Victory a low blow, and she just leaves.
I had forgotten, by the way, how great Dawn Marie was at her role, at her character. She was fantastic.
Absolutely. And I'm sure in the building you were very angry that Carino was potentially going to be screwed out of this championship.
Oh, I was. It's so funny to think back at it now, watching this. I was living and dying with every moment of this match.
Credible canes Carino in the head 3 times. He won't go down. Instead, super kick for the 3 count. New ECW champion Steve Carino. Jerry Lynn back in the ring, presents the belt to Carino. Carino celebrates as the show goes off the air. I really liked Carino as a wrestler. I really was happy for him to get a run as champion. This was a fun main event. 24 minutes and 7 seconds is your total runtime.
I will say that I was disappointed that it didn't make it on air, because I can tell you, I can see it in my mind's eye right now as we record this show. The moment that the referee's hand hit the mat for a 3 count, I bolted. Like we were in like the front row of like a back section. So basically we had like a guardrail in front of us, and all I had to do was like hop the guardrail to get to the walkway to then run down towards ringside. The second that hand hit the mat for a 3 count, I jump over the guardrail and run to ringside. Like I still to this day can't believe I did that and don't know exactly why I did, but I was so happy that Steve Carino won the world title here.
Best match for you. What are you thinking? There's only a
Oh,
couple to
God.
work with. There's only a couple to work with.
There are literally only two to work with. There are
Yeah.
only two right answers. I emotionally, and if I take myself back to the moment, it's hard for me not to say Steve Carino winning the world title, that four-way match. There are a lot of things wrong with that match.
There were so many things that made me mad, but so many things I enjoyed while watching it.
I think I can't in good conscience say that it wasn't Kid Cash and CW Anderson.
You could say Kid Cash and CW Anderson. Cash was very spectacular.
I also enjoyed the tag title match for what it was, but it didn't live up to my memory of it or what I had hoped it would be, especially when you look at some of the other meetings between combinations of those teams. So yeah, I will, through 2020 eyes, I'll go with Korea or with Cash and CW Anderson, but my 2000 eyes certainly gave the main event the nod.
Yeah, nothing was a blowaway on this show, which I think is of all of the past shows we've reviewed. We've always had something that was, obviously, but there was nothing blowaway on this show. So I'm gonna go with the main event, even with Sandman in it, and the way the way that all the things that were wrong with that match, still. A solid Steve Carino performance. We got some Jerry Lynn. I'm going to say that the main event for me was the best match. The worst match. What do you think?
If you go first on that, because I have to really think about that for a second.
For me, the worst match is easy. It was the Baldies and Chili William Balls. This match was terrible. I couldn't see anything of it, and it was all over the place, and it was a hot mess. I hated this match. It was let's see, how long was this?
12 minutes.
12 minutes and 17 seconds. So yeah, no, this was absurd that this match was so long and it was so bad. This is by far the worst.
Yeah, I can't say that only because as much as I hate the Baldies, I will always have a soft spot for those just wild, reckless ECW brawls. I don't ever need to see them again as far as people doing that in modern day. But there's part of me that I'm not going to lie enjoys that. I feel like we had two matches sandwiched back to back on this show that were trying to be the wild, reckless, old school ECW style. And I felt like Balls Mahoney and Chili Willy versus the Baldies succeeded much more than a Rhino versus New Jack did. So I will go with Rhino versus New Jack as my least favorite match on the show.
That was both of those are correct answers. Absolutely. I was torn between both. I went with the Baldies. But yeah, that's it. That's it for this show. We want to remind everyone every single Thursday we post on social media what event that week's podcast will cover. So make sure that you're following us on Twitter and Instagram at WrestleAtRandom. You can like our page at facebook.com/wrestlingatrandom. And of course, wrestlingatrandom.com is the website that has the entire back catalog of this podcast, every single link to subscribe and support the show. Make sure you interact with us on social media. That's the best way to do it. And subscribe, rate, review. That helps others find our show. Tell your wrestling fan friends about us. Tell your friends who used to be wrestling fans about us, and make sure that any of those positive reviews help us work the algorithm so other fans can find us.
Absolutely. I will say that I enjoyed finally getting a chance to go back into my ECW memory bank and watch this show. It was fun to watch a show that we were both at, but I really, really hope that we get an ECW show from a bit more of their glory days at some point, because I refuse to believe that every ECW show will age as poorly as this one did.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for joining us, Adam.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. And we'll talk to you again next time.